The comments and statements made within the show are the opinions of the commentators and their guests, have not been evaluated by the FDA, and are in no way attempt to diagnose, treat, mitigate, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. The contents of the show are not to be construed as medical advice. If you have a health condition or health concern, please contact a licensed, qualified healthcare practitioner.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom, and this is a Supplement Super Sleuth.
That'll be me. And the herbal storyteller.
And that definitely would be me. And together, we're going to take a peek behind the curtain of the natural products industry.
We'll be sharing naturals in the news, dispelling lots of myths, interviewing key players in the industry, and highlighting our favorite herbs and supplements.
So with that, let's pull back that curtain and see what's there.
All right, cue the music. Good morning, Nancy.
Seriously, did you have to say cue the music? And why couldn't you just let me cue the music?
Because I get so excited about the music. I love this music.
I love the music. Yep. I know.
So,
goodness, it's early. Or it feels like.
Can you believe that we are on episode 24?
No, I can't. It's so cool. And we're almost finished with a full year of being on a podcast. I certainly feel a little bit more adjusted to it when I first started. I had no idea what the heck normal. I was doing. It's starting to feel like there's a groove for sure. Yeah. It's just like our music. It's very groovy. Yeah, I really like it. Today on episode 24, we have our naturals in the news like we always do. And then our naturals in the know is a very special guest. Her name is Mimi Hernandez. And she is the lead kind of everything for the American Herbalists Guild. She's been president of the guild for
10 years now, right?
10 years, a decade. And she is first of all, she is Mama Earth herself. Yeah. She's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person, very sweet, but she does big things, So we're really excited to have her on our show today. And of course, per usual, we have our very, very fun naturals in the know after our naturals in the news, which will start. Tom, you go first today.
All righty. Well,
age before beauty.
Thank you. All right. Let's see if I can remember what I was going to talk about.
Okay.
What I really, this is something that's really kind of fun for me because as a kid, and I think most of us as kids probably got snacks that were celery with peanut butter.
Yes.
Right. That was
my favorites.
Just the snack that you looked forward to, that salty, crunchy peanut butter and that salty, crunchy celery all together. Delicious. Well, celery, is cultivated worldwide, and it's literally been used for thousands of years. During the 1700s, it started being cultivated as a food product as opposed to just medicine. Before that, it was actually medicinal. And it was cultivated from its wild ancestor in the northern Mediterranean, starting at about the 16th or 17th century. And before that, though, it was used, by the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians. It was used in ritual. It was used as medicine. And so celery has a really wonderful place as more than just a canoe for peanut butter.
A canoe for peanut butter. And it's part of mirepoix. So if any of you are starting to get your mirepoix together for turkey stuffing,
that's right.
Celery is a part of stuffing and a part of soups and a part of so much. The French built it into, it was such an important food that they built it into cooking. So it's great.
And it's funny because we think about, you give this garland to athletes to glorify them and to celebrate their honors, their victories. And celery leaves actually they used to make garlands out of celery leaves. They also, but it's kind of interesting because not only did you get a celery leaf garland if you were a victorious athlete, but you also got a celery leaf garland if you were dead. So go figure that out.
And maybe you were both.
It's like, okay, he ran himself to death.
He just ran the marathon and died at the steps.
And it's really funny because, in Greek mythology, celery's spicy odor and some of its, taste and a dark leaf color, they were associated with the underworld and with death. So, it was really kind of an interesting deal. Now, literally they found celery garlands, if you can believe this. This is amazing. In the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh, Tutankhamun. Yeah, Tutankhamun. Thank you very much. Not a very common name, so Tutankhamun is kind of hard to remember sometimes.
We call him Tut.
Yeah, Tut, King Tut for short. Good old Tut. He was a good guy. He was a good guy. He was a big guy. But it literally, celery is interesting because you can use the plant, you can use the seeds. When I had my juice company, celery was one of the most prominent content of the juices I made. And especially in Hawaii, or if you're in a hot climate, celery juice is very wonderful because it has all of those natural salts, and those salts happen to be cooling. So It was wonderful. Like on a really hot day, you whip up some celery juice and drink it down, and all of a sudden your body would just kind of cool down. It was really wonderful. Cool. Now, you can even use celery seeds, and celery seeds are then sometimes mixed into a paste with honey, and they were used for a poultice for inflammatory conditions like boils and rheumatoid arthritis, gout, sciatica, backache.
I put it in my tuna.
You put it in your
I put it in my tuna. When I make tuna salad, I put celery seed in it. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, yeah, and it's really, really interesting. It's considered a heart tonic, and it's used to lower blood pressure. Sometimes it's used for the spleen and the liver as a liver tonic. It's been used for brain disorders, for body pain, for sleep disturbances. Really commonly used for breathing difficulties like asthma and bronchitis and pleurisy. And it was considered effective for treating measles and all types of fevers. And that's just the celery seed. So very interesting. You can take the celery seed and make a decoction, make a tea out of it, and drink that tea. And it's great.
It's delicious.
Mm-hmm. It really is. It's unusual.
It's really delicious.
It's an unusual.
Yeah, it's unusual.
You don't expect it, but it has a really wonderful taste. It was all,
it's almost aromatic the way that it comes across as a tea. Yeah.
And part of what was interesting is celery seed was the only thing that it was kind of contraindicated against was things like insect stings, venomous stings, or, snake bite or things like that, because it has an ability to thin the blood, and really that would rapidly circulate the venom throughout the body.
Right.
So you wouldn't want to use that. But by thinning the blood, it allows for faster and better circulation. And so it was also, interestingly enough, we didn't mention it in the piece that we did a while back on men's sexual health, but it was used for sexual debility and low libido because of the fact that
it has an effect on blood and circulation, which makes a lot of sense. Right.
And,
and it's a food.
It's a very good food. In Ayurveda, the juice of celery stalk was used for lung congestion. It was used for weight loss. It was used to stimulate a poor appetite. So, it's one of my favorites. It's a galactagogue, so it helps to promote breast milk. And that's a very, nice thing for women who are nursing, who are, having trouble with getting their milk to flow or having enough. It's a wonderful galactagogue. It's uterine stimulating. It's a diuretic. It's also a nervine. So this is to me, it's always fascinating when a plant can run so many roles, especially a really humble plant like celery. It is not only a calming nervine where it just calms you down, but it's also a stimulant. So it calms you down, but it also wakes you up and makes you much more present.
And I think that's its balancing effect. It has, like a lot of foods, it has this seesaw homeostatic effect. And, you wonder, I see it a lot in, places that have juicing, they do juicing, and what a great kind of everyday tonic to have is celery.
And for those people who are all about the, I got to reduce the acid in my blood. I got to bring my pH, change my pH. Celery has been known to have, phytochemicals in it that reduce blood acidity or acidosis. especially common with, tissue inflammation, like associated with gout or diabetes. And it's extremely mineral rich. So there's one of my favorite herbs that is used as food besides just being used as medicine. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And then
I always have it in the house. I never not have celery and celery
seed. I can't even imagine cooking celery.
I can't imagine. Yeah. Especially in the winter.
Yeah.
It's
great in soup.
It's in every soup and every stew, and absolutely, without a doubt.
And then
kind of
yeah, and I want to do a quick shout out to Nan, because I've got another one. I've actually got 3 that I want to talk about. I'm on a roll here.
As food is medicine.
Yes, as food is medicine, but this one's quite a little bit different. It's a combination of green tea, which is as one of the most widely used herbs as a drink, as a refreshing drink on the planet. So many people drink green tea. But combination of green tea with another beautiful herb, rhodiola, which is known to be very, very balancing as far as our endurance, as far as our being able to be focused and pay attention even in stressful situations. It can be used, depending on when it's picked, can be used as a weight loss supplement. And if you combine that with magnesium and with your essential B vitamins, they've done a study that was done, actually, this is a brand new study. It was done in 2022, was published September 25th, 2022 in Nutritional Neuroscience News. And basically, they found that when you combine green tea and rhodiola with magnesium and B vitamins, it balances your brain activity and it protects against the effects of what they were calling social stress. Now, I'm sure none of us have any idea what could be meant by the idea of social stress, but I thought it was a really fascinating study because they took healthy volunteers. So, literally, it's not like they were doing this on people with some kind of a disease or something. But when they found that the EEG for these people was electroencephalogram, was showing that they had their brains went down into a theta state. And theta is what's associated with that resting, calm, relaxed, chilled out state of your brain. And so that combination was really effective for everybody. It really literally has the ability to offer protection from the negative effects of stress.
A lot of people drink green tea because it replaces coffee or it gives them an extra boost. And it seems, odd to think that a green tea and rhodiola, which rhodiola has that, it's a homeostatic kind of herb, but it has that lifting, it can lift you up when you feel a little bit like you've lost your energy in the afternoon or something like that. I love rhodiola. It's something I take pretty much every day. But, it kind of gives you that clear, centered feeling. So it's not a speedy thing, but combining it with a little tiny bit of caffeine that's in green tea, and then a little bit of a relaxation effect with the B vitamins and the magnesium, you get this overall balance. So you get this centeredness, you get this energy, but it's not a wired feeling at all. So it's a really lovely idea.
And it's funny because when they did the test, which I always think is, it fascinates me when who designs these tests and how. So they took really healthy, regular, non-stressed people. They gave them either, combinations of like magnesium and B vitamins and green tea and rhodiola, or just, they left out the B vitamins, or they left out the green tea, or they left out the magnesium. So several different ways. And then they gave them a placebo. Some of them got a placebo. And so after they took the supplementation, then they put them through a stress test. It's like, okay, here, this is going to mellow you out. And now we're going to stress you out and see if there's any difference. And they noticed that there was a significant difference in mood, in blood pressure, in heart rate, and in literally because they do a salivary cortisol test, or a saliva cortisol test, to see how much cortisol you're producing. And the people who were getting the rhodiola and the magnesium and the B vitamins they had lower cortisol levels, indicating that they were in a much less stressed state, even
stress. So
after
they can handle the stress. Yeah,
right,
they can handle
even
the
after
stress better.
a test with the name like Trier social stress test. So it's like, this is a social stress test. We're going to have 55 people talking to you all at once, demanding that you. So we're going to let you go next, Nan, because I just had.
We're kind of in this food is medicine today, which is really it's always a wonderful conversation. And since we're in a podcast and we're not, this is just general information. It's so apropos because the more that you do things on a daily basis in your diet, and using herbs that are foods that are superfoods that you can have every day, and foods that are healing foods, the better you just feel generally, and the more that you can kind of manage yourself as you age. This is really all about how do we move gracefully through our life with as little imbalances as possible. And I think that that's really about food is medicine. So one of the things I want to talk about today, and we found this research called related to a grain that actually can help prevent diabetes. Now, I know a lot of you out there are probably thinking, oh no, I'm, paleo all the way, keto all the way, grains are bad. That's a very sad conversation for me when I hear people say, oh, I haven't touched a grain in 2-3 years. And it might be right for your constitutional type or for your disease state if your doctor ordered that you not take any grains. But you might also be missing huge swaths of glyconutrients. Yes, there are sugars that heal. There are complex polysaccharides that you're not getting because you're not taking in healthy grains. And there are other micronutrients that you are definitely missing from taking an entire category of food out of the diet. Some constitutional types need more grains or healthy grains versus other constitutional types. It's very true. Whole grain and not processed grain into flour makes a big difference. But quinoa is especially interesting, and it's undergoing an enormous amount of research recently. Eating quinoa regularly can help prevent type 2 diabetes. There was an incredible study that was done directed by Diana Dan Rizzolo, a researcher from the Sunir Biomedical Research Institute and a member of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Open University of Catalonia. And the recent study was published in the Journal of Nutrients. Quinoa is not quite a cereal. It is and it isn't. It originates from the Andes. It has very high nutritional value. It's exceptionally rich in minerals, iron, magnesium, folate, vitamins B, E, and C, which Tom and I have talked about how important E and C is, and quinoa has loads of it, and has concentration of essential amino acids, and it has a very complex protein and amino acid profile. It was historically believed that quinoa-based diet would benefit some cardiovascular diseases historically and traditionally, and also metabolic diseases. And it's really a packed nutritional food. The scientists said that they carried out a review to find out if the scientific literature had any support for these attributes to quinoa. And at first, there was really no previous scientific evidence. So they did this gold standard crossed over clinical trial. And they started with animals, with mice, and they looked at the polyphenols. And then they studied it with type 2 diabetes. And then they set up a human clinical study. They recruited pre-diabetic subjects over the age of 65 with very high risk factors for developing type 2 diabetes. And then over a course of a month, they monitored the volunteers. At the end of the month, they replaced the foods rich in these complex carbohydrates such as cereals, pulses, tubers, and pasta, with quinoa and other foods that are made that are like quinoa, like fornio, or other kinds of tubers. And they noted very interestingly that their blood sugar was very low. And then they switched it around. They started giving processed flours of other grains, such as brioches and breads and pastas and crackers and breadsticks, and the volunteers' blood sugars spiked precipitously. So they compared the blood sugar patterns found with quinoa and the other breads and flours, and there was a massive difference between the two. So the scientists found that the quinoa-based diet helped control lipid levels, which is why they believe it could be useful in controlling high cholesterol. Yeah. And they also found out that it did reduce blood sugar almost immediately. So the reference to the clinical trial is called Glycemia Fluctuations Improved in Old Age Pre-Diabetic Subjects Consuming a Quinoa-Based Diet. You can find that published in June 2022 Nutrients. It's really exciting to me because, you know, I often, because I see people for just overall health, we do talk about the diet. And sometimes, you know, people will come in and they're on a fad diet where they've completely removed all grains, all carbohydrates completely. And at first they lose a lot of weight, but then all of a sudden they're weak. They start losing muscle mass. And these are people who are over the age. If you're young, you won't lose that kind of muscle mass. But people over the age, you know, of 50 start really losing a lot of muscle mass, and they start becoming nutrient deficient without some of those really important whole grains. Mm-hmm. And quinoa is one of those that I really, really love. It helps people to kind of feel satiated. They feel full. It's got great fiber. It keeps their colon regular. I mean, it really is a lovely, they call it a pseudo grain, but it is a type of grain.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's interesting because I know in India there are certain days of the month that people will fast from grains. And part of that is, you know, for religious purposes, and part of it is just an interesting, like, okay, if once a month everybody in the country fasts from grains, that just gives us a longer supply of grain, you know, mm-hmm. in case of famine or things like that. And, you know, it's interesting that quinoa is not really considered, it's like you said, it's a pseudo grain. It's not the same sort of starchy grains that we think of when we think of, you know, wheat or rice or things like that. So, and it's kind of, for me, it was interesting because it was kind of an acquired taste. You know? It's like it
tastes different. It does.
Well, not only that, but the mouth texture feels different. You know, it's that light, airy kind of a feeling as opposed to that really chomp, you know, starchy grain. So it is very different to eat, but it's actually delicious, and the protein content is quite amazing.
Very high. Yeah. It has a complete array of amino acids. Certainly not as dense as chicken or fish or turkey, but it has a complete array, which is unusual for grains. Grains don't have all the amino acids, and usually you have to use peas and corn and other things mixed with the grains in order to get a better array of amino acids. But yeah, definitely quinoa has it, which is pretty great.
Super. Yeah. That's awesome. That's very interesting. And
you got more.
Do you have more,
Tom? Yeah. Do you have more food as medicine?
I do. Hopefully, we're not making everybody hungry, but this is another one that I love. And being in California, we can lay the claim to being 100% of this next food item that I'm going to be talking about is commercially grown in California. Not that it's not grown anywhere else, because you can grow it in your backyard garden. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. The flowers of this food are so pretty, gorgeous. They're just stunningly beautiful, and that's the very humble artichoke. You know, I absolutely, artichokes, their history dates back to really ancient Greece. I mean, literally the first writing about artichokes was the 4th century BCE. And then in the first century, Pliny the Elder, who was, one of the great writers in the Greek pantheon there, recommended artichoke and cardoon, which is another form of artichoke that's just grown for its stalks. He recommended for intestinal distress, for freshening the breath. And he had some other, he was like, use it for baldness and use it if you want to conceive a boy child when you're. But it's interesting because going from that, both the Romans and the Greeks, who were the original ones to start using artichokes, they used it as a choleretic, or something that increases bile, and also as a diuretic, something that increases urinary output. Now it's interesting that cardoon and the artichokes were first, they all centered around that Italian and Spain and France, and eventually they
Mediterranean area.
And Catherine de Medici. Medici, rather,
de Medici,
Catherine de Medici. She was an Italian noblewoman who became a queen in France, and in 1547, actually. And she loved artichokes, so she brought artichoke cultivation into France, and it actually, for some reason, became known as an aphrodisiac. So it was even found on the plates of that, rather randy king of England, Henry VIII. And we won't launch into the song because we all know the I'm Henry VIII, I am, but that's okay. Now 100% of the artichokes are literally,
Tom.
They're cultivated. They're cultivated here in California.
They are.
And in the Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay area, we are the artichoke capital of the world.
Of the country,
world.
Or the world.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, and I've been there, and I've been by those artichoke fields, and they are unbelievable. Yeah. They're gorgeous.
Yeah, and you talk about really a very, very generous.
And the artichokes are like this big out there.
We won't even go into the fact that when now what they're used for, interestingly enough, is they're used as a hepatoprotective. But they're also, they were traditionally used to stimulate appetite. So they were put into aperitifs. They were put into wine and put into aperitifs to stimulate appetite, enhance digestion, because they increase bile flow. They're cholagogues. They increase that bile flow from the liver. And that also has a natural laxative effect because it's a lubricating effect on the intestinal tract when it's released from the liver. And it's in Germany and Sweden, they literally make an alcoholic extract that they use. Sonar is an Italian liqueur made from artichoke, and it's kind of bittersweet, and it's consumed either before or after.
Before the dinner, usually.
Yeah. And so if you're ever out fancy dining, an aperitif is something that you drink before, and a digestif is something that you drink after. And artichoke will do both of that. Now it's literally a very low calorie vegetable, only about 60 calories per 100 gram serving. And it contains cholesterol lowering fiber, and it's got no fat or cholesterol in itself. So it actually is a very good source of fiber, wonderful way to start reducing a lot of the cholesterol in your own body because it has that ability to sort of attract cholesterol to it. Artichoke hearts are really a good source of vitamin C and folate. Yes. And some minerals like potassium and magnesium. Potassium and magnesium and phosphorus. And artichoke hearts are really, like I said, they're great if you're suffering from constipation. They're because of the fiber content. Now, beyond the basic nutritional value, they're a really functional food because they were used to lower the risk of specific diseases like, the inulin in there is much more concentrated in the flower heads of the artichoke, and it's been used to replace fat in table spreads and baked goods and dairy products and so on. So inulin acts as a natural prebiotic, and it feeds our beneficial really bacteria. Especially it's feeding the bifidobacterium, which are important because they're primarily in our large intestine. And so as we age, the bifidobacterium content in our large intestine starts to dwindle. And it's important to be using foods that we can use. Again, food is medicine. To enhance that and protect that bifidobacterium population in the large intestine. We can certainly supplement with it, and there are some wonderful products out there to supplement with it. But
bifido usually those populations in the large intestine usually become very sparse, even in your late teens, early 20s. So by the time you're 40, 30, 40, you don't have a lot of bifidobacteria in large intestine. So anything that encourages large intestine health is really important as you age, like way more than you think. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but I have a BM every day, I'm fine in that department. Not really, because you can't see microbiology with your eyes. Okay.
Right.
And in the importance of that, or of the artichoke, in really underscoring and helping and supporting the large intestine, the health of the large intestine is crucial. It's such an important vegetable.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, which I didn't know this before, but literally artichoke and some of the compounds in artichoke can be used as natural coagulants. So for vegetarian cheeses or vegan cheeses, and you wonder when they say natural coagulant or so on, it's actually sometimes it is the artichoke itself. It's literally
what, to make it firmer?
enzymes.
To make I
Yes,
see.
proteolytic
Yeah, to make the
enzymes
cheese.
in the
Got it.
cardoon flowers and the artichoke flowers, and they're natural coagulants. So they're used in
I
cheese
get it.
making. If you don't want to use rennet, from an animal's stomach, you get a vegetarian cheese or a vegan cheese, you can use actual artichoke.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's news to
That
me.
fascinates me too. And, so literally and truly, the other thing is you keep in mind that the inulin is, as with all the research that's coming out on our microbiome, anything and everything we can do to feed that microbiome and keep it healthy. Because what we're really doing is we're feeding our own unique, and I mean really totally unique. We could be identified by our microbiome as well as we could by our fingerprints. By feeding our unique microbiome, we keep our bodies very, very healthy. So it's nice to be able to feed your resident bacteria rather than constantly inserting other bacteria and hoping that they all get along.
We don't see artichokes that often on the East Coast in the grocery store. You kind of have to really look.
Well, and it's interesting because they have a season. They definitely have a
definitely
season.
Do.
But they've got so many different chemical compounds, and beta cytosterol and stigmasterol, and
that's great for men.
Yeah.
By the way, that's good for your prostate. Both of those compounds.
Absolutely. So
beta cytosterol and
that was why it was
stigmasterol
considered to be an aphrodisiac, because
Yeah.
the diets back then, lots of heavy fats and so on, and it just really was giving people fits. Even in the Three Musketeers, there was a written part in the Three.
That's because they had a lot of lard.
Yeah,
they had a lot of lard. They cook with lard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. Those were my 3 food items for the day. And
so great. And we have just one more naturals in the news before we go to naturals in the know. A lot of people, even in their 30s, mid 30s, 40s, 50s, and women especially, really struggle with fat and fat composition of the body, having high fat composition, or trying so hard to lose weight, but not just lose weight, but lose fat and kind of get back to a healthy body again. And there was, Tom and I are always reading the research and scanning for things. And because we are both trained in Asian herbal medicine, we often look for research supporting some of our well-known Asian herbs, Chinese herbs, right? So there is an herb that's it's lotus. It's actually eaten as a food over in Asian India. Lotus is part of the diet over in the Far East and the Middle East, and it's not so much here. But Nelumbo nucifera has just undergone more gold standard research for overweight patients, but also patients who have high fat composition. And just recently in September 2022, there was a randomized controlled human clinical trial that was published in Natural Products and Research on the fat reducing effects of lotus. Nelumbo nucifera leaf extract. I just wanted to share it with all of you because lotus is wonderful plant. It's part of traditional Chinese medicine. It's part of our pharmacopoeia as herbalists, as what we would call planetary herbalists, because we use plants from all over the world. But looking at the interesting research on this particular plant has really inspired me to share that here on our podcast. So the abstract basically read, the leaf of Nelumbo nucifera has been widely included in the diet of Chinese people from the time of the Ming Dynasty, which was a very long time ago, talking about, I think, 500 years. And in this study, a randomized double-blind trial was performed to determine the effects of the extract of sun-dried Nelumbo nucifera leaves. So they use the leaf, which is typical of lotus, right? Which includes quercetin. It's a naturally occurring compound inside of lotus as the main components. All these people were overweight, and they had a body mass index of over 28 kilograms per milligram. And they did this study over 12 weeks. So that's a 3-month study, which I really like. It's a solid amount of time. Both men and women were in the study, and they were compared with the non-intervention control group, and the whole body fat was significantly decreased after ingestion. The men also significantly reduced visceral fat, which is that fat around the waistline, the hips, the abdomen, and the chest, and even more so than the women, typical, right? Because it's easier for men to induce metabolism and burn visceral fat, but all lost weight in the lotus group. And lotus is an edible plant, just like artichoke. You know, it has kind of a similar shape to artichoke, but it's a lotus, of course, is grown in water. It's a water loving plant. So, and it's safe, and because it's a food, like food is our medicine, right? Because it's a food herb, it's something that we don't have to, it's not an alterative. We don't have to worry about, are there going to be secondary side effects? Are there going to be issues if somebody's on, medication? Of course, if you are on medication by your physician, you do want to check with a registered clinical herbalist or your naturopath or your chiropractor before you start taking lotus. And lotus leaf, but I always feel like, well, what a wonderful thing. You can take something that's a food, and over a period of time, not adjusting anything. I mean, that was the other thing about the study, was they didn't adjust any food. So they just started taking lotus leaf. And in 3 months, had a significant loss in weight and body fat composition. So food is thy medicine. Let food be your medicine, and medicine be your food. So let medicine be your let food be your medicine means try and think of your food as medicine, because most people think of their food as entertainment.
Exactly. And if a little is good, more is much better. And
right.
Not always the
It's
case.
not how it works.
Yeah. And you know what, Nan? I want to give a shout out to because a lot of the sources of this, food is medicine type news that we get come from a wonderful organization known as the American Botanical Council.
American Botanical.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they have a great publication,
job.
online publication called Herbalgram. So you can go to herbalgram.org. That's herbal, HERBALGRAM.org. And you can get some wonderful stuff. You can sign up. I would encourage you to sign up, become a member of the American Botanical Council.
Yes, especially if you love plants.
Yeah, because you'll get some fabulous news. They have a beautiful magazine that they send out regularly. Yeah. Awesome, beautiful pictures.
Beautiful.
So just a quick shout out to our very good friends at the American Botanical Council.
Yes.
We love you guys. So.
All right, and now
we got a great guest now.
We have a great guest in our Naturals in the Know, Mimi Hernandez. All right. Well, we're really excited today to have a very special guest with us on our 24th episode. Can't believe we made it. We're almost through our first year, so we're very pleased to introduce to all of our listeners Mimi Hernandez from the American Herbalists Guild, and Mimi Hernandez, MS AHG. Has served as the executive director of the American Herbalist Guild for 10 years now, full decade. She's a registered herbalist. She has mentored hundreds of clinical and community herbalism students. And Mimi holds a Master's of Science in Herbal Medicine from Maryland University of Integrative Health. And as an herbalist, Mimi believes strongly that keeping plant wisdom alive is essential, and has dedicated her life's work to serving as an advocate for both traditional and professional herbal pathways while building cultural bridges of understanding. And that's really true. The AHG has really gotten behind that. She lives in the mountains of North Carolina, where she stewards the Ponderland Native Plant Sanctuary, which we're definitely going to ask her questions about. But welcome, Mimi. We are so honored to have you on as our special guest on the Supplement Super Sleuth and the Herbal Storyteller podcast. So really thrilled to have you. And we have some questions, but we really just want you to share your experience of stewarding the American Herbalist Guild over the past decade, and then we're definitely going to ask questions about new projects that you're bringing forward for all of us herbalists here.
Right.
So welcome.
And it's go ahead, Mimi.
Oh no, you.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating for me that we have the American Herbalist Guild, and so many people don't think that herbalism is regulated or that herbalism has any kind of structure. That they just kind of think they're a bunch of wild, crazy hippies that run out and pick weeds and put them in a pot and try and eat them or drink them. And there's so much more to it. And I know that you've been with the American Herbalist Guild for 10 years, running the American Herbalist Guild. And in that time, the diversity of the herbalists in the guild has increased so many fold. It is such a diverse group of people now. We just had the American Herbalist Guild Symposium over this past weekend. And it was wonderfully attended. It was outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland. And Mimi was there with all of her wonderful, wonderful assistants. And we just want to find out more about what is the American Herbalist Guild and how can people become part of it? How can they participate in it? What in any way?
All right. Well, thanks. I love what Nancy said about stewarding the American Herbalist Guild. I really thought she was going straight to stewarding the land, but it's an interesting parallel, stewarding the herbalists. And I've got chickens here, so I'm also like herding chickens and all kinds of stuff. But we won't make those comparisons. But yeah, so much going on with the American Herbalist Guild, and it is, it's the American Herbalist Guild is a voluntary organization, so we don't mandate that herbalists across the country, become part of the American Herbalist Guild. We don't set regulations for the country, but we do have a large body of membership and lots of practicing herbalists who choose the American Herbalist Guild because it gives them a high standard to work toward and an ethical policy of practice to stand by. So we do have our, highest tier of herbalists being the clinical skills, being the registered herbalist. And that's a lengthy application. It's a peer-reviewed process. So we have other registered herbalists, reviewing case studies of applicants and reviewing their materia medica and their educational backgrounds and things like that. And I'm a registered herbalist myself. I know that I chose that path to work work towards something that helped me feel validated in the field of clinical herbalism, before I really sit down and start working one-on-one with people in a large capacity. It just gave me that reassurance that I was on the right path. But we do go beyond
Right.
clinicians. I mean, we have growers and medicine makers and educators and even like just people, like anyone. My mom is a member and she is not an herbalist. She just wants to see what we're doing. So
Go mom, go mom, go mom.
we have lots of members who are just curious and just want to get the biannual journal or listen to some of the free monthly webinars or just support the cause of ensuring that we have access to herbal medicine in the United States, and that we have somewhat of a pillar or a beacon for best practices in clinical herbalism, should the herbalist need that resource. So much going on, and our website is www.American Herbalist with an S, we're plural, herbalistguild.com. And there you'll find all kinds of free videos, content, educational content, articles, so much there for aspiring herbalists, including information about herbal regulations, what is herbalism just in general, all the way down to, how to practice through COVID, best practices for clinicians. And so we have just an enormous amount of resources for both the aspiring herbalist and the clinician as well.
Mimi, thank you for really making that clear, because I think what's really important is that people understand that it isn't just for clinical herbalists, although, like you said, best practices and a peer review for those who are practicing herbalism today, which I am very grateful for, to be able to say, yes, as a practicing herbalist, I am AHG. There's a group of people who have sat down and said, okay, is she ethical? Does she follow a protocol and paradigm? Does she understand what is in her scope of practice and what's not in her scope of practice? So that is really, it feels good, and it makes me feel rooted and anchored in a community that really understands the importance of having that background. And in addition to that, if I decided to be a grower or a medicine maker, which I am not, but if I were, then I would have a group of people that I could continue my education, and I could learn best practices for those parts of herbalism. Herbalism is broad, like you said. It's exciting to know that we have this incredible group at the American Herbalists Guild that we're kind of a backbone or a place to dip into professionally. I love on the website, I love the history of the Herbalist Guild. That it was first talked about in the mountains of Brighton-Bush. And I love that story because one of my herbal teachers, Michael Tierra, was a part of that in 1989. He invited the herbalists to come and exchange ideas about creating this group. So it's kind of fun to see that some of the herbalists that breathe some life into the idea of the American Herbalists Guild are still practicing today and still a part of the lineage. And I know that's Mimi, that's you. I mean, in addition to all of your duties for guiding the American Herbalist Guild, you are an extraordinary teacher and clinician yourself. So you are juggling a lot of hats.
Well, and if I remember rightly from talking to you, Mimi, isn't there a book on the way too?
There is. Yeah, actually, I'm in the middle of that. The National Geographic Herbal is coming out in about a year. I've written most of it, but there's so much, editing, fact checking, layout. I'm just learning all this language now. So, but it's been a really exciting process of, pulling together some of my favorite herbs. It's on 99 herbs and various herbal traditions around the world. So it's just really wonderful to share, a lot of my knowledge and my reverence for herbs and traditions and native plant conservation and all the issues that arise from being an herbalist, that sustainable harvesting and so many things that we really need to keep our finger on the pulse of to be ethical and practice right.
I love that too, because again, that goes back to the idea that a lot of people do still think that herbalists are, that they really don't have any kind of a structure to what it is they do. They just maybe read a few books. They, grandma used this herb, so I'm going to go out and pull it out of the garden. And there's no, so they have this transference of thinking that herbal products are probably all just, scrapped out of somebody's yard, and maybe there's still dirt or bugs in there. And they really don't quite understand how much it's actually a science. It's really a science,
It is a science. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, there's a lot to know about the solvency of various constituents of herbs and, accurate plant identification and, making sure you have authentic and truthful labeling. And there's so many standards involved with creating a product for the market. But sometimes, those grandmas, they really have it down with the dirts and the bugs.
They really do, don't they?
And the tonics.
Exactly.
I practice that way now. I did, when I was more of a clinician, because now I do have my hands full and I don't practice clinically so much. Most of my practice is for home use, for friends and family now. And I kind of went from being this herbalist that measures everything, does it by the book and weight to volume and now I'm just such a folk herbalist for my family, so I am that grandma now that goes out.
And there's nothing wrong with that, especially given your knowledge, Mimi. You probably think, it's okay, a little dose of exoskeleton, not a problem.
It is.
You can use some help over here too, so this is for you. But herbalism is so personal that way, isn't it? It's a very personal practice and it's a practice of medicine, whether people want to say it or not. It's absolutely a practice of medicine, and it's been the World Health Organization recognized herbal medicine as the primary means of healthcare for probably 90% of the world's population. So it is phenomenal to see someone like you and like the other herbalists.
I agree. It's a very important healing modality within the scope of in America, within the scope of other integrative practices. I do believe that herbalism around the world and still in America does serve pockets of communities that are underserved by the conventional healthcare community.
Absolutely.
And marginalized folks who have trouble gaining access to healthcare or for some reason have less than optimal healthcare in conventional ways might seek an herbalist. And because herbalists are tucked away here and there and, might have, open arms for people because that's the people's medicine.
Exactly.
It is the people's medicine.
And the American Herbalist Guild is a great reference, right? That if somebody is looking for an herbalist in their area, they can actually go to the American Herbalist Guild and find out, is there somebody in my general area that is a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild that I can contact?
Registered.
Yeah. That's www.americanherbalistguild.com.
Yeah, with an S after
it's an incredible sort. Yeah.
Yes, the registered herbalists are in a really directory. And that is something to find. So it's still, it's like, I know when I was growing up, it was a real challenge to find an herbalist. Like I wanted to study herbalism at a young age. So that was part of my passion for the American Herbalist Guild is, helping bring that, to the ground more as far as accessibility for folks looking for it. So I think we've made a lot of strides. There's so many more herb schools and education programs than ever now. So we don't take credit for that, but we definitely are a resource for schools and education. We do have a variety of educational suggested standards for schools who are looking to craft a program. We have educational criteria for people who are taking a self-study path, and so lots of information there, even for people who choose a self-education path, or for people who are looking for a program that's already been developed and made available.
And speaking about it, herbalism being like a people's medicine, because it really is. That's one of the ways that I approached it when I first started. Was it is a people's medicine. It's for all of the people, and I know that many of the herbalists in the AHG have taught students who have gone on to do like free herbal clinics and emergency herbal medicine and so on. And so, can you speak a little bit about that? I mean, I think it's fascinating that you can be an herbalist who's been trained to, like, maybe you go to a festival or you go to some place like New Orleans after it was flooded, and now you've got people who are developing mobile buses with herbal answers to that. I get so excited about it.
Yes, I think there's so many compassionate herbalists that are just ready to respond. I know that we have a lot of impassioned medics and frontline herbalists who are there for crisis response. And the truth is that herbs do well in that setting, because especially herbs for trauma. And there's a lot of herbalists today are really taking that seriously and becoming trauma informed in their approach. And it's just such a wonderful skill to have. I do talk about this in my book about how herbs serve communities, and how some herbs are like lavender, for instance. It's just such a like trauma response herb because it de-escalates the nervous system. It de-escalates that panic response. And so, and then all the nervines, there's just so many wonderful herbs that calm and ground the nerves in the face of that high stress situation, or, after an emergency or crisis. So this is somewhere where herbalists do really well. And they have such a big heart, and so you often see the whole country mobilizing for critical events that happen even around the world. I know that right now Ola Obasi has solicited herbs for after the storm in Puerto Rico. She's a registered herbalist practicing in her country of Puerto Rico, and she's really mobilized a lot of support, and still looking for support to stock her practice so that she can tend to the local people of her area, who were affected by lack of power and lack of housing and things like this. So yeah, I think that's somewhere where herbalists really do some profound work. There's Herbalists Without Borders too. That whole organization.
Yes.
I love that.
I love it. Yeah. Someday.
Yeah.
Well, and it's, what's fascinating to me. What's fascinating to me is the fact that those herbalists then can literally get together and send medicine that they've made to herbalists who are reaching out and saying, hey, I need help here. We need some anti-anxiety medicine here. Right. We need some trauma medicine. And, the other part of it that fascinates me is, somehow nature seems to be able to know in advance what people in certain regions are going to need. And you have these plants,
and those plants start growing.
And from a from a government botanical horticultural point of view, some of them are called invasive species.
And,
right. Instead, they're really not invasive species. They're more like, salvational species. They're like, okay, mimosa is a really great example. Mimosa is like, at the time that the hurricane hit in New Orleans and everything was going on way back then, the mimosa trees were blooming. They were all over the place.
Hinges.
And it's such a great, just trauma calming you down, opening your heart, making you realize it's okay. I'm still connected to Mother Earth here. Things are going to be great. It's just an amazing. Now, I want to ask you, what is Ponderland?
I love what you just said, and it's so poetic, and that the plants do show up for us. But I honestly don't think I'll ever have the need for as much Japanese honeysuckle as I've had to pull off this land.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there are some that are very generous, over generous.
So I live in Polk County, North Carolina, and it's like, this is like kudzu central over here. We've got kudzu taking over the county. We've got Japanese honeysuckle. We've got Japanese knotweed, all kinds of the princess tree, the tree of heaven, the mimosa, we just have so many invasives, not to mention English ivy that everyone plants in their yard. And so, what you start to see sometimes is, yes, maybe we need some of that medicine. And I think it's important that we learn to use that medicine.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or even use it as food, or find ways to go to the abundant.
It's like a superfood.
Yes.
Exactly.
But, go to the abundant plants. But the issue in some regions is that a lot of the plants that are more aggressive are taking over habitats, and that's my concern here on Ponderland, which is my homestead, where I am really trying to create space for the native plants of this habitat to express themselves. And so, part of that involves pulling a lot of invasive plants from the forest. When I first got here, there was a very thick mat of Japanese honeysuckle on the forest floor. And as I've been rolling it back and pulling those roots, and it's been such a beautiful practice, because literally I'm just sitting on the ground with my hands in the soil, pulling those little rootlets out. And in some way, I've gotten to know every inch of this land just as I go and pull out this honeysuckle. So it's been such a gift, but it's so rewarding, because then I've seen just black cohosh and yellow root just like explode on the property, just like really take their rightful place along the creek. I've seen cardinal flower and all kinds of wonderful, like passion flower vine in the field. And a lot of it is not so much about, okay, now I have this piece of land, I'm going to go to the plant store and buy all these natives and put them in the ground. It's not really like that. More, it's like letting them, because they're already there. It's just letting them rewild back into their
and emerge, right? Yes, and not be suppressed or oppressed. Yeah,
they were there. They were there before, and they will remain afterwards. Yeah,
we have a.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we have a little pond that before I got the homestead, it was like mowed all the way to the edge. So it was a really cute little farm pond. And just by stopping mowing, we've had 20 different native plants just take their place around that pond. It's been so beautiful to watch. And that just means you have pollinators, more pollinators, more food for pollinators, more food for local habitats. Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, is native plant sanctuary and kind of rewild the land here. And what I've been teaching a lot of folks is how easy it is to become a member of the United Plant Savers Botanical Plant Sanctuary, by taking some simple steps on your land, by educating people on what you're doing with the land and native plants and medicinal plants, and that having a commitment to conservation, especially of medicinal plants that are, if we don't look out for them, then we're going to run out. That's what it comes
Yeah,
down to.
it's true. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a really interesting piece of property here in New England, a little bit north of Boston. And, when I came to the property 5.5 years ago, just walking around it expressed itself, pink lady slipper, ghost pipe, a lily of the valley. Pipsissewa. It just was stunning experience of. Right. And it's interesting because the town that I live in, we don't have street lights at night. I mean, we literally don't have street lights. And there's this, and the pond that the property, actually part of my property goes under the pond, but, it's preserved, and it is a wild experience. I mean, there's definitely still invasive species from early settlers that put down these, pea, they're kind of in the pea family to try and re-nitrogen the soil, and I'm often pulling them out. When I pull them out, it is amazing what comes forward. So I, in my own little way, and of course I haven't been connected to what this movement that's going on. I'm so excited to hear, Mimi, that you're doing this and that this is a possibility, because it makes me think, I'm just gonna keep going and let this property express itself, because I'm sure there are plants that have been dormant. There's wild rose everywhere. Oh God.
Well, lily and lily of the valley, and
right. So it's tremendous that you're doing this, and I know it's not an easy thing to do. It's time consuming and it's backbreaking work. It's physical, but it's lovely to be in that kind of touch where you're outside and digging in the soil and allowing the property to express itself from its original plants. I love that.
And so let's put a little plug in there for the United Plant Savers. How would somebody get a hold of United Plant Savers to find out more about that? And it doesn't take a big piece of land, right, Mimi? They could do it on even a half acre or an acre if they're doing it properly.
What really I love, because I was originally really inspired by my good friend Kat Meyer, and I typically go visit her once a year and spend some time with her there. And she lives in town in Charlottesville, Virginia. And she doesn't have a giant property. She doesn't have, she lives in a neighborhood with a normal backyard and front yard. And her property is a botanical sanctuary, United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary. She's got the sign and everything. I was like, wow. But
amazing.
I mean, she really did landscape her yard with native plants, and she brings students and they look at plants. And that's what you need to be a member of the sanctuary, is to take care of plants and bring folks and teach them. And it doesn't have to be you don't have to have people on your property, but you can teach from, on Facebook. Like, part of my teaching is just like a Facebook photo album that I do of like native plants, or, I'm always teaching somewhere or other, but yeah, so small yard to, I know colleagues who have like hundreds of acres that are in part of the sanctuary, or like you said, half an acre, or even container gardens. People have been able to have some really beautiful, like little backyard deck gardens that qualify. So it's more about just, what you decide to care for, and then how you share that enthusiasm in the community.
Yep. And you can search United Plant Savers on the internet and get connected.
Yeah.
And part of just to add, because you mentioned it earlier, when you do that, you're creating more space for pollinators. And one of the really amazing things about pollinators, because my family history is beekeeping. My great-great-grandfather co-invented the modern day beehive. It's a wonderful, wonderful legacy to be part of. And one of the problems that we have agriculturally in this country is monocropping, where we have these huge pieces of land that are just monocropped. And that monocropping is really hard on pollinators. It's really because there's no diversity in their diet. And when we have these islands, literally that's what they are, and we hope they grow, we have these islands of native species that people are protecting, that they're nurturing, that they're bringing back. That's increasing pollinator diversity because it's increasing the diversity of their diet. So I just take my hat off to United Plant Savers. I take my hat off to you, Mimi, and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, this is amazing stuff.
I am just, I'm so amazed and thrilled. And Mimi, thank you for spearheading a lot of the programs that help us continue bringing American herbalism forward. And
10 years is a great deal of
stewarding.
dedication.
And it's unbelievable. That is incredible dedication.
I can't believe it.
You're really
and if for those young people out there who might be listening in and be thinking, okay, well, I hope this is not just a bunch of old people getting together in rocking chairs talking about herbs. There were at the Guild symposium that just occurred, there were so many wonderful, motivated, active young people, in their early 20s and even earlier than that. There are herbalists out there. If you're interested in herbal medicine or herbalism at all, contact the American Herbalists Guild. In the 10 years that you've been with it, Mimi, I've seen the diversity, but not just the diversity of the population there, but the diversity of how many ways you can be part of an herbal movement.
That's right. It's tremendous. Yeah. It's worldwide now because of your influence, Mimi. Yeah. I mean, it's really wonderful.
Goosebumps.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for coming on. We want to wish, and I heard that you're getting married soon. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations, Mimi.
Thank you. Haven't set a date yet, but I've got, as you saw, my herbal BFFs is really pulling out their calendar for me to get something on.
Exactly. So with a book coming and with marriage coming and all of that, congratulations, Mimi, and thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
For being on our little podcast. All right.
I'm excited.
Okay, everyone. Until next time, I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom.
We'll have more great topics and guests in the very near future. So join us right here in 2 weeks as the Supplement Super Sleuth
and the Herbal Storyteller take another deep dive into the fascinating world of the natural products industry.
See you later.